Hi everyone, and welcome to the third session of the MuStE Talks. Today we're going to discuss corpus compilation, and you're going to learn how to compile your own corpus. Just to introduce myself a little bit, my name is Maria, and although now I'm a lecturer at the University of Oviedo, I too used to be a student at the UDC, at the Universidad de Coruña, and that's why I feel really excited to be talking to you all right now. Now, a question you might ask is, why on earth should I be building a corpus, right? I mean, for those of you familiar with corpus linguistics or having already had an introduction to corpus linguistics in your degree or master's, you've probably already heard how having all the texts you want to look at within reach does not equal having a corpus, at least not in linguistic research. And sometimes this sounds really frustrating because it's like, well, I already have access to books, journals, websites, tweets, recipes, and most of these are in electronic format, so I have them on my phone, on my tablet, and they're so easily accessible anyway. So why would I need to build a corpus of my own? And the thing is, when you want to do linguistic research on natural language, that is, if you want to look at how language is used in whatever context, how it behaves, building a corpus of your own means having your whole research material under control, which in turn basically means half your job is done. Well, maybe not half, but a significant part of your job. On top of that, learning to compile a corpus makes you much more systematic and neat about your work, which essentially makes your job easier for you when it comes to classifications or finding a particular text or linguistic feature in a particular context. And on the whole, not only if you're going to devote your life to corpus linguistics, of course, but in general for your professional skills, being able to build a corpus makes you stronger in research because it gives you the knowledge, that is, you actually experience how to design your research material according to what you need or what you want to look at or investigate. Now, another question you might ask is, so does this mean that if I want to look at language in use, I will necessarily have to build a corpus of my own? And the answer is that depends on what you want to research. If you want to look at, for instance, a particular aspect of language in general, for instance, English, though nowadays you'll get a corpus for almost any language, you've got so many sources that you can use. And I mean very large, complete corpora such as the British National Corpus or the BNC as we usually call it, and so many more, and they have a variety of registers. For Galician, if you have watched the previous video by Luis Puente Castelo, you've got the Corga. You also have spoken corpora, because sometimes we assume that a corpus is a collection of written texts, right? But some corpora, such as the BNC, have spoken parts, corpora of oral language stored as usually both audios and transcriptions. But also, if you want to look at some particular domain or register of language, you've got a number of specialized corpora which are already available. For instance, if you would like to study how political speeches evolved through the centuries, the small corpus of political speeches compiled at the University of Helsinki is for you. Other interesting diachronic corpora are the corpus of early English recipes compiled at the Universidad de Las Palmas de Gran Canaria, and of course the Coruña corpus of English scientific writing, which we are compiling at MuStE here at the Universidad de Coruña. In any case, at the end of this video, I will give you a useful website where you can find information on so many already existing corpora, which is this one, but I'll just give it to you as a link to use, okay? I mean, there are lots and lots of corpora here you might find useful for your research, so I'll just give it to you at the very end. And yet, although there are a few specialized corpora that you can analyze, what if you want to do something different? What if, for instance, you want to look at how predictive models are used in Chinese fortune cookies? just in case, I mean, you probably know what they are, but Chinese fortune cookies are cookies they give you in a Chinese restaurant at the very end when you've already had dessert, if you did, and you have ordered a tea or a coffee, and they bring you one of these. So it's a cookie that's really yummy, and it comes with a message inside on a little piece of paper, which is usually folded. And the message is usually either something good or something pretty neutral. On this picture, it's so much faded that it's difficult to tell, but apparently it says something like, your mentality is alert, practical, and analytical. Aha. Right, I'm not sure if this is meant to be a compliment. It's probably a compliment, yeah. But I'm not sure how this is fortune telling. It looks more like a statement of a fact, but it does look like something good, right? Well, the thing is, I have observed that most messages that come in these are, first of all, not exactly telling the fortune. I mean, they don't have a predictive model, if we put it in English, as for instance would be the case with this one. You will buy an inspiring cookbook, it says. Okay, I'm not sure how real this is. I found it on the internet and it's probably made up. But for the sake of giving you an example of what we could typically identify as fortune telling, that will do. Another one would be luck is coming your way, says this one. Or soon you will be sitting on top of the world. How cool is that? In any case, what I wanted to say here is that while some fortune cookie messages like this one do tell you that something good is going to happen, others seem to be unrelated and come in a totally different shape, so to speak. And another thing that I've observed, okay, that's enough, is that most of them come in two languages. Here, for instance, they come in Spanish and Chinese or Spanish and English. So, what if you wanted to compare and evaluate how accurate the translations of those messages are, if, of course, you speak either Chinese or English? You might want to build a corpus of Chinese fortune cookie messages then. And for this purpose, going to the Chinese restaurant or ordering Chinese food may be a rather expensive way to start. So you may want to go to Lidl instead or to a specialized Chinese food market and buy a bag, a few bags, or even a box of Chinese fortune cookies. Actually, why not just order them on Amazon and save some money? They'll probably come with a free tote bag as a gift anyway. I insist so much on your getting as many cookies as you can because your corpus needs to be representative. Your box of cookies should have enough variety, not so much of cookies as they all taste pretty much the same, but of messages, to represent the whole variety of fortune cookie messages that there are in other boxes in the world, or at least in a given language. And so when you get them, you will first open them and then you will eat the cookies. And then comes the fun part, compiling your fortune cookie corpus. And given that your texts come on little pieces of paper, your first step in compiling this corpus will be digitizing your texts. That is, either taking a picture of them, because they're so small that that would be okay, or else scanning them and saving them as separate PDF files, which is the way it's usually done with larger texts. Mind you, at this point your texts are not computer readable yet, but you should always keep a digital copy of them. I mean, you can't afford to have these little pieces of paper flying around because that's valuable research material and it must be properly stored. Step 2. Transcribe your texts. Yes, you already have them in PDF, but they need to be computer readable for further work. So grab a coffee, okay, maybe a tea in this case would be more appropriate, and a computer and transcribe each of the texts. You can use special software such as OCR if you want to convert them from PDF into Word files, but remember you will have to proofread them really carefully because software may make a few mistakes. On the other hand, ideally try not to use Word documents for your files, but instead type them in plain text format to save them as TXT files. These will be easily readable by a concordance program or concordancer, at least by many of them, at a later stage. And you might ask, why can't we use a Word document just to store them all? Well, the thing is, with technology so far advanced, we deserve more than just hitting find each time we want to find a term. And of course, because you will want to keep a record of that term for each text, that is, you want to know whether a predictive modal, such as will, appears in a text or not, how many times it appears, or whether it does not appear at all. And of course, this is a very simplistic example because this fortune cookie corpus would be made up of very, very short text, such as could also be tweets, but this one would be even shorter. But texts in a corpus can be much longer. For instance, they can be samples of research articles, and a Word file is simply not enough to allow efficient word searches, such as, for instance, looking for collocations. And something really important, do not forget to label your files according to some system. Give them names, maybe numbers, create a sequence. They should be properly indexed so that by looking at the files of your corpus, you will know what you're dealing with and what corpus or subcorpus you're dealing with. Now, step 3 usually consists in proofreading each of the texts of your corpus. This may be a rather dull task, especially if your corpus is large and the texts are long. Of course, here this is not the case, and yet it's important that you double check for typos because, and especially in a small sized corpus with teeny tiny texts, having a word ignored from the searches because it contains a typo would have a much more significant impact on your results. Finally, as a fourth step, create a table where you enter information about each of your texts. Of course, here we're dealing with very small texts again, which are all anonymous and there isn't much information we could include. No date or year of publication, no author, no title. But if, say, you're working with two languages, Spanish and English, then it's obviously important to write that down. Or, for instance, some messages may contain an actual Chinese proverb, so that could also be a category to distinguish them from others. And that's how you come up with subtypes or small subregisters of a larger register within your corpus. Also, depending on where you've got each cookie box, you might want to include that information too, because who knows, it might end up being relevant at the linguistic level when analyzing the data and you might get statistically significant results. Yeah, okay, so that's it. But now when you wake up, you're going to say, okay, so wait. From what we have seen, compiling a corpus consists largely of digitizing the text you've selected and saving them in PDF, typing them up in TXT, proofreading them and making a table about them? Is that it? Well, yes and no. The example we've seen was that of a very unusual corpus with very short texts in paper support, so actual physical text with no stated author or authors, and basically no subtypes unless we categorize them ourselves. However, just for you to see another example of a specialized corpus, this time an already existing one, I would like to introduce you to the compilation process of the Coruña corpus of English scientific writing, the one we're working on in MuStE, the research group organizing these very interesting talks, and of which I'm happy to be a member since the times when I was a nerdy undergrad. Okay, back then I wasn't officially a member, of course. But you know what? I was in my third year when I was introduced to all this corpusy world, and my god, it looked fascinating to me. Here, let me show you why. The Coruña corpus of English scientific writing, shortly called the Coruña corpus, is a diachronic corpus of scientific texts from the 18th and the 19th centuries. So you get texts from the 1700s and the 1800s, and this is so interesting to work with because it's really like a time machine. You see all those special characters and that somewhat unusual language they would use back then. And then you see how it gradually changes because that was the time when English was gradually becoming a scientific register. And because in science there are many fields and many different scientific disciplines, the Coruña corpus contains a number of twin subcorpora, which are practically identical in the way they're compiled, so that each subcorpus contains text on one scientific discipline, as you can see here. So basically, the Coruña corpus is like a tree, and the little subcorpora it has, I mean not so little, but the subcorpora it's divided into are like branches of the tree. Okay, so to this date, the four upper branches of the tree, the subcorpora of astronomy, philosophy, history, and life sciences, have already been compiled and published, along with a book of pilot studies, while several others are either almost ready to be published or nearly finished, such as that of chemistry and that of linguistics, or else they're still being compiled. And this is how we compile the Coruña corpus. We also do this in 4 stages, although these 4 stages are slightly different from the stages in the compilation of the fortune cookie corpus. But basically they are selection of texts, encoding, compilation of metadata, and proofreading. So first of all, we select the texts. Remember, this is a diachronic corpus, a historical one, so we include 2 texts per decade. For instance, 2 texts for the 1720s, then 2 for the 1730s, etc. All up to completing the 19th century as well, so that we end up with 40 texts. It is not rigid, there may be exceptions, but that's what we normally have. And because the scientific texts of the time used to be rather long, okay, so they have essays, treatises, we only include 10,000 word samples. Sometimes we may include a whole text if it's shorter and it's worth including. The second stage is called encoding. So we first scan the texts unless they're already in PDF, which is actually common because many of them are in open access and already digitized, and you can find them on the internet. And then we basically type out the text, but we do it in XML rather than in TXT because this is the electronic format supported by our concordance program, the Coruña Corpus tool developed also at the UDC. So to type them in XML, we use XML code. And this is how this whole process looks. This is all the same text, one from our philosophy subcorpus, but at different stages of the encoding process. And regarding my experience at MuStE in corpus compilation, I must confess I really regret never having had to do this scanning part. Because when I've never done the scanning part actually, because I've never been to one of those libraries where those texts can be found. Usually you do it during a research stay, and when I was doing my research stay, we just had our texts available on the internet for the corpora we were compiling at that moment. So, finding those books on some dusty shelf, getting your hands dirty, and actually scanning them, I don't know, that sounds so amazing to me. Now, in stage 3, we compile what we call the metadata, or information about the text and about the author. So here we have, these are all relevant pieces of information because remember how a corpus has to be representative and balanced. That is, it needs to contain enough variety which would reflect the reality of the period, in this case in a balanced way. For instance, we include both male and female authors because, difficult as it may be to believe, there actually were female scientists at that time, and some of them were even published. But of course, there were just a few of them, and so we usually only include a few in our different subcorpora. That is, when we can find any text written by women, because again, this is rather difficult. And regarding balance, it is also very important that each subcorpus contains a wide range of genres, with as many, if possible, as there actually were in that scientific discipline at the time, such as treatises, essays, articles, textbooks, lectures, and, interestingly enough, letters, which is not so common a genre in science anymore. So this is how a finished metadata file looks also when opened with the Coruña Corpus tool, with the information about the author and then the information about the text. And finally, what we do is proofread. This is a very painstaking task because the texts are pretty long and you've got to always check them with the PDF. Typos are very common at the first stages, so we do at least 3 rounds. But once the texts are proofread and have hopefully no more typos, they are ready to be used as part of the corpus. So I have given you this example because I really wanted you to know what we do here at MuStE, but also because you can see now how a big corpus is compiled. And I know that this has been a lot of information and very fast. And this part may have been a little tedious also, but should you have any questions, I will be very happy to answer them. And as promised, here's the website, actually a couple of websites, where you can find many different readily available corpora, most of them of English, but also of other languages, both specialized and general, written and spoken, and the website is varying from the University of Helsinki. Not all of them are in open access though, but some definitely are. You should just check the information on the corpus. And the second website, CKP Web, is an electronic portal and concordance program all in one, built by Andrew Hardy at Lancaster University, where you can also find many corpora, including an annotated version of the Coruña corpus, annotated for parts of speech. For that, you would need to write an email to Andrew Hardy, the creator of the CKP Web, and he will give you access to whatever can be freely accessed. And that's it. I really hope you enjoyed this talk as much as you could. Should you have any questions or any criticism, or you feel that there is something missing, or it was too fast and you need more information, please don't hesitate to drop me a line on my Uniovi email address and I will get back to you as soon as I can. So thanks a million for listening and have a lovely day. Bye.